So, to begin with, I want to ask you, who are you and what is creativity to you? We can start with Tove.
Okay. So I'm Tove Blomgren. I'm the creative director of SALI, which is a future manifestation lab. So we work with visualizing what the future could be if we get it right. Because we think we're in this crisis of imagination right now that is overshadowing any attempt to do the things that we need to do. It's like we lost the ability to dream big and engage in big human projects. So what if we get it right? What does that look like? And we try to make that very tangible, easy to understand, and tell stories, because we need new stories about the future. So creativity, what is that? I mean, it's a big word, but I think creativity is our ability to think beyond what the now is, to imagine a much radically better world.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, Molly.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I'm Molly. I'm CEO of an organization called UN Live, which is about helping hundreds of millions, if not billions, of people to enact the agency they already have in them and start taking action. And Amitav Ghosh is the novelist who wrote that climate change is a crisis of the imagination. So I completely agree with you on that. If we can't imagine a better future, then we can't act to it. We are working with creativity in a rather utilitarian way. Because actually neuroscience and behavioral economists are now pointing to culture, in particular mass culture, as the single greatest and untapped tool to changing the way we think about societies and what's possible in societies. And it's not fluffy at all. So there's a neuroscientist that whose work I follow quite, well, I'm a huge nerd, whose work I follow. And she studies trends in implicit bias, so the beliefs that we have in our head that we're not even aware that we have them. And I would posit that whether or not we take action on climate change and really reinvent our entire societies it's a bias. And so we really need to work on neuroplasticity and rewire our brains and then rewire our societies. And the only thing in the United States, my home country, I live here in Denmark now, but the only implicit bias that has seen a dramatic decrease since 2007 in the United States, the only one of all the ones being measured, is sexuality. And that has seen a 64% reduction in the last 20 so years. Wow. The implicit bias is projected to disappear by the time my children are adults, which is enormous shift in what we deem as acceptable. And the science now is proving, and then the economists from all the universities that are studying it as well, is proving that what drove that change, when the trend lines for race and gender and everything else are just really sad and scary, but for sexuality it's really quite hopeful. And they're actually showing causality by the fact that Hollywood got involved. And Hollywood said, it's going to be the gay characters that are the cool people that you want to be friends with, and we're going to completely change the way people imagine sexuality and what fits in society. It's Hollywood in a sense of love, which we can get into later. But so we're using mass culture now to drive changing perceptions of what's possible at scale in the societies where we need to make a lot of big changes, like India, Nigeria, the United States, and other places. Yeah.
Thank you. And Diego.
Great. Diego Galafassi. I'm originally from Brazil, and my background is on participatory theater. I trained with Augusto Boal and experienced firsthand the power of arts to drive really significant empowerment and social change. And I did my PhD at the Stockholm Resilience Center, where I had the privilege to speak to hundreds of artists around the world and think about really this leading role of the arts in sustainability transformations. At the moment I'm also connected to Lund University, and I run a studio called Hum Studio Interactive, where we produce stories, immersive stories and documentary films and so forth. I love the fact that you started with the questioning about creativity and what it means, because creativity and innovation, it's also the banner that a lot of the business as usual runs under. I think there's a lot of business as usual trajectories that realize the world is going to change fundamentally and now is asking for creativity and innovation. So I think really we need to ask, when we talk about creativity, is like, what is creativity at the service of? And my colleague Per Olson, who's also here, talks a lot about transformations and the fact that by any way that you look forward, the journey is a transformative journey. So we should be thinking then about how can this creativity serve the purpose of transformation and not maintaining the status as it is.
Preach.
Thank you. So as a following question, I wonder, how do you use creativity within your working process? Because I assume you use different forms of creativity, I can imagine. Would you like to start, Molly?
Sure. Well, I think every human being is creative because we all solve problems all day long, and that's what creativity is about. And some of us do it better at 5 or 6 in the morning than we do at 6 o'clock at night. You've got a panel that's holding you back from the open bar, full of morning people, so we're not at our best. I think creativity is, for me, it's a very personal question. So for me, creativity is what gets me going is how can I be somebody who's willing to dismantle silos between different sectors of society and help sectors of society realize how they could work together in ways that they might not have ever thought possible in order to drive change. So I'm working on a program that will soon be announced. It's pretty under wraps right now, that merges the fields of acoustic ecology, conservation finance, popular music at scale, to unlock one of the most promising fields to understand where we need to direct our biodiversity conservation efforts, to do large-scale citizen science and public engagement, because the way we've been communicating the crisis has not worked. So we have to change. We completely have to change the way we communicate it. And then to show other industries that if the music industry, like pop music, can drive conservation finance, then any other industry in the world can and should. So it's a way of being provocative, but blending organizations together that would normally never work together, and saying, if there was ever a time in society where we needed to take the risks, and we were joking, like, make shit up as we go. We don't have a hell of a lot of time. No one knows exactly what we're doing. But throw all hands on deck and be willing to get super creative without any promise of it being successful. Every single one of us has the moral obligation to get creative on a daily basis and to put ourselves out there, knowing full well that we might fail, but with the responsibility that is an act of hope. And hope is we were talking about hope comes out of despair. So that's where I get creative, is by pushing boundaries and bringing people together that normally wouldn't work together in order to achieve something new. But I think everybody is a creative person, and we need everybody to be creative in their own ways. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Can you relate to any of that Molly has said?
Quite a lot. I think one of the notions that I often talk about is the idea of the transformative imagination. So how do we actually trigger that kind of imagination that looks at the systems as they are and finds ways to transform? And that is, in essence, a jump of creativity. I like that sentence says, we accept the reality of the world with which we are presented. And I think one of the things that it lies really at the beginning of a lot of the work that we do, both in the art, doing artistic work, or working with capacity building within the creative sector, is the idea to realize that the world is first imagined, everything around us has been first imagined, and so therefore these systems can be reimagined. And I think not accepting the world as it's presented is perhaps a really good sort of entry point for that creative jump. So I think the work that we do is essentially about questioning these assumptions and opening up and finding possibilities within them.
Yeah, and imagination is at the heart of everything we do at Sally. And it's like our brains are wired to find like danger and catastrophe. Like, who here loves a disaster movie, good disaster movie, zombie movie? Yeah. I'm a huge fan.
Yeah, me too.
ironically, but we're so like even the Bible, it has like 2 pages of paradise, and then it jumps into like murder and pest and brothers killing each other and the floods, you know. So it's like humans love to think about ways the world could end. And now we're at this point where we're like more likely to accept the end of the world than the end of capitalism, for example, which is in direct conflict with a living world. So imagination is the tool. We haven't been using it very well recently, so have to practice thinking about the preferable futures. What could it look like if we get it right? What does it look like if we value other things than constant growth or consumption or weekend flights to New York?
Yeah, thank you. And
Yeah.
and to me, a world without creativity would be pretty boring, I think. Many of you agree. And very fantasy-less. And I often say that we have to be more like children, because children use creativity mostly every day, every hour of the day. And they have this imagination and fantasy, and I think we all need to embrace that. So I just think that we should keep that in mind, and I can imagine that it is a big part of your work to use creativity when you try and come up with new ideas and ways to expand and reach a new audience and get more nuanced and varied. So to go back to Climate Live's own goals are based on 3 words. We have engage, educate, and empower. And we engage to expand the global climate movement by engaging a new audience through the power of music. We educate to raise awareness of the challenges facing people on the front lines of the climate crisis today and climate scientists' future projections. And we empower and give people tools to put pressure on the world leaders within economics and culture and everything. And we simply just need them to act against the climate crisis. And this brings me to the next question. So what do you want to achieve with creativity? Do you have some sort of goal for it? We can start with Diego.
Go for creativity. I don't know. I think a part of work has also been about articulating what is precisely the role of the arts and creativity within sustainability transformations. And I often speak about the fact that artists in their studios, they are developing capacities that are really essential for the kinds of work that we have to do. So art not so much as that thing that, or arts and creativity as that thing that comes at the end to sort of communicate or dress up a message, but something that is really opening up possibilities and expanding the range of possibilities that we have. I think that leads me to kind of this idea of like, what is the connection between creativity and hope as well. Because I feel like for any artist in the room, you recognize the fact that creativity, the moment of creation really asks you to be present to the world. And I feel that maybe that is something that got quite lost. We're not able to be present to what is unfolding around us, and with presence comes care and all of that. So I think those are really important skills that artists are developing in their practice, that I think should be much more disseminated across policy, science, education, design, everywhere. It should be present everywhere.
Tove, do you have...
Yeah, I think we need to be creative. Like often when you talk about creativity, you think about art or culture or design. But I think now we need to be creative on a much grander scale. So for one, we have an economy, again, that is not compatible with life on Earth. We have this infinite growth paradigm that is like a child's fantasy. Nothing can grow forever, and we're seeing really devastating effects of that. So we need creatively rethink our economic system. We have great people like Kate Raworth, Jason Hickel, the degrowth moment, Timothy Perquet in Lund, who are being very creative, thinking about an alternative economic system. And that's the key. Without that, I mean, everything else is kind of a distraction. then we have a democratic system that is not fit for this time at all, and we're seeing that everywhere. This kind of 4-year or 3-year elections, representative democracy, it's not working. They're not taking any brave decisions. We're not doing anything at the scale we need. So let's rethink democracy. There's citizen assembly. That is an amazing format of basically randomly picking citizens to become policymakers with the help of experts. They've been tried in Paris, in Brussels, in England, and they make such radical policies that are just rational if we want to continue living on this planet, but it's banning advertisement and taxing flights and degrowing the economy, for example. That comes out of just ordinary people thinking rationally, listening to science. And then third, we have this dualism where we've disconnected from nature, and we're talking about saving the environment. Like, that's something else. Let's think about the environment. It's like we're the environment. This is everyone here is the environment. This is about saving ourselves. So we need to be creative on a much grander scale than we have.
I feel like, yeah,
thank you. And Molly?
I 100% agree with both of you. There are a lot of banners here that I think are really important, like silence becomes complicity, and there's one in the back that says outside voices are, I could see it before the lights were on, are very helpful. I think that we need to be able to break down all of the systems and rebuild. And the only way we can do that is if people like us, who are privileged enough to sit in fora like this, get out of the fora bubble and start listening to voices around the world who currently are living incredibly creative lives. Most of my experience in the world, in more than about 50 countries, is in the global south, in places that are often seen as victims of climate or beneficiaries of aid, places where people live in poverty, and that's just wrong. It's a wrong way of thinking about it. People who've suffered what we imagine to be more difficult lives actually can be and should be role models to us about how to live more sustainably. So one of the things that we're working on doing is building with organizations that are really thinking deeply around how to create empathy in the world, because you can't have creativity if you can't imagine a better future unless you want to include others in that future. There's a science around how you teach people to approach each other with curiosity instead of fear. And I think it's really important that we figure out, and my organization's working on this amongst many others, that we figure out how people who are in refugee camps and who are in really difficult situations are given a place of power in the world, and that we tell a counter narrative about where creativity and resilience and power lies, and build a movement of the many people in the world who already know what needs to happen, but who might not yet be sense that actually we belong together. And in one of these experiments, we had a forest ecologist from Panama come and speak to people in South Africa, and but with no plane rides, right? It's all carbon neutral and positive in many ways. And she said, you know what, this whole notion of us being separate is completely wrong. We need to look at forests and understand how biodiversity functions. We were talking about mycelium when we were geeking out backstage, how forests functions and how we all are interdependent upon one another. We don't live apart. So I actually think creativity in addressing the climate change requires that each of us questions who we are as individual people, of course, but more importantly, to whom we belong, and therefore to whom we owe a debt of responsibility. And it starts with listening. And who you listen to matters a hell of a lot, and we're not listening to the right people right now.
I agree. Yeah. Very interesting thoughts and very good thoughts. And I mean, we already touched it a little bit, but to me, creativity and hope kind of walks hand in hand. And without hope, there's no creativity, and without creativity, there's no hope. And I think many movements and organizations are using their creativity to feel a sense of hope, like creating events, maybe events like these, and where people can connect with each other and learn, get educated. and where we can just learn from one another and see things from different perspectives, which is very interesting because you all work with different things. So
Yeah.
I find it very interesting that you all see it from, so differently. And then I wonder, how can creativity become some sort of hope? And how can we all learn to be more creative? Do you have any thoughts, Diego?
I think you answered before when you said about the creativity of children. I think also the creativity that is in elderly people and the creativity that is in the artist studio and so forth is that kind of authentic creativity that asks you to be present, as I said before. I think that generates hope because that kind of creativity shows you that the world is constantly coming into form, into new ways, and new possibilities open up. So I think it really gives you it puts you in contact with that regenerative aspect of life, which I think we all want to be part of and we all strive for. So I think that is the way I see creativity turning into hope. And then I just wanted to say one final thing about hope is that usually hope is seen as a prerequisite to action. We need to have hope in order to act, and I believe that's totally wrong. I think it's the opposite. We need to act in order to be hopeful. So hope is actually an outcome of action. So we should just be, if you want to be hopeful, then just act and just go for it.
Very good.
Yeah.
Molly.
I was going to say kids too. You actually almost had my youngest sitting on this panel with us because she insisted, and eventually I was like, stay home, I'll bring home dinner. I was saying how my first daughter's middle name is Hope, and the reason for that is because I had a really hard time carrying a child to term. So she has 4 siblings that were not born before her. And Hope was in the depths of despair, getting up and fighting and advocating for more medical testing for me. But then I think she's become the person who's really driven me the night she was born to sign up to become a climate activist. And then she became vegan, and therefore my whole family became vegan. And when we were moving to Copenhagen from the US, and she was younger then, she was 7, she had this childlike, which we should all have, right? We all need to have it, approach to the world, because she is a child, and she was 7, and she was complaining about moving to Copenhagen. She didn't want to. Mom, I have friends here. Do we really have to go? And I was, yes, babes, we have to go. And then she's like, but your job is about fixing global warming, right? And I will admit, at the time, I thought I was lying to her, and I've now figured out that is my job, and it's all of our jobs. So I don't actually think I lied to her. But in the moment, I was lying, and I said, yep, pumpkin, that's mommy's job. Mommy's job is to fix global warming. And she goes, okay, great then. So when you're done with that, what's next? Right? And so, because for her, it's like, if you can imagine fixing it, then you're going to fix it, and mom can fix it because mom fixes everything else in the goddamn house, right? So I think we do need to embrace a childlike expectation that this can be fixed, because children rarely see problems that seem intractable to them. They don't. I'm surrounded by them all the time. They don't see problems that are intractable. They see opportunities, and they make a lot of messes. And in the end, they create things that are really spectacular. But all of the children deserve to ask the question, what's next? And it's our job to enable that to happen. Yeah.
If I can just jump in, I totally agree. And I think many of us in the climate movement can relate to that we have a lot of expectations on us. And especially me and my activist friends, there are a lot of people, especially adults, coming up to us saying, oh, you're doing a great job, continue with what you're doing. And
not your job.
No, like you're going to save the world. It's not how it works, because everyone has to do it, and everyone has to be in this fight, you know, so we can't have that big of a burden on our shoulders.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I mean, I only awoke to the planetary crisis just a few years ago, 2018, and it was a brutal awakening. I was crying for weeks when I understood how much danger we're in. And I think we talk about this pull of hope, but you need the push of despair, because I didn't change anything until I got terrified. So we have to tell the truth about how much danger we're in, and how extreme danger our children are in.
Yeah.
And most people I know would do anything if their kid was sick. If there was even a chance that they wouldn't have a good future, they would sell their apartment, they would stop eating meat. Are you crazy? Of course I would do that for my kid.
Yeah.
But still, it's like we're only acting if it's profitable and convenient. It's like, yeah. So I think, like, tell the truth. I want you to panic, then I want you to act. I think we need that as well, and then we need to see where we go from there. And anyone can join. Just put activist in front of whatever you're doing. I've become an activist designer. You can be an activist accountant, or an activist journalist, or an activist musician, or an activist economist. So every single person is needed, because this affects every single aspect of society. So just like join us, become activists. I know there are a lot of them here already.
I think, just if I could add to that, because what you just said, I think, you know, one of the most prominent and serious climate scientists, you know her, I'm sure, is her name is Catherine Hayhoe, and she's a really prominent scientist. She's the chief scientist of the Nature Conservancy, and she says the single most important thing
Talk about it.
is talk about it. Because every single person already is a climate activist. They just don't know it yet. And who the hell cares why people come into the climate fight, right? We can't be purists anymore. You can't be all about, like, it has to be this way. Like, we need the people who voted for Donald Trump to be as welcome in these sorts of fora as us. And because a lot of them would also say, I care a hell of a lot about conserving the land where I want to go deer hunting and duck hunting and what have you. So you talk about it in ways that allow more and more people to onboard. And so those sorts of conversations, like you're saying, you have to be scared and then you need to move into action. And every single person would stop eating meat to protect their child, no matter where they are on the political spectrum.
I think the time is up for us.
Yeah.
And just to end it, I think that we all need creativity, and without creativity and art, there will definitely be no future. So thank you for listening, and thank you to the panelists.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Thanks.